Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are taking a mind-bending look at one of the most famous and, let's be honest, probably one of the most misunderstood texts in all of human history. We are talking about the Book of Job. We're going to completely shift our paradigm today using this incredibly insightful analysis by Dr. John Walton. If you've ever wrestled with this book, or if you're just fascinated by ancient literature that tackles the absolute deepest human questions, you are in the exact right place. We're going to look at the very architecture of this ancient masterpiece and unlock what it is actually trying to tell us.
Okay, let's just jump right into the deep end here with the ultimate question people always bring to this ancient text. Is the Book of Job history, or is it fiction? Did all of this literally happen exactly as written down, or is it just a totally made-up story? People debate this endlessly, right? They get completely tangled up trying to prove it's this rigid historical account, or they just dismiss the whole thing as an outright fable. But Dr. Walton argues that approaching the text this way actually sets us up to fail from the very first page. It's just the wrong framework entirely.
And here's why. Treating it as either strict history or pure fiction is a totally false dichotomy. Forcing Job into one of these two rigid boxes completely misses the point. Now, genre gives us a strategy for reading, right? But Job is completely unique in the ancient world. Smashing it into the category of pure stenographic history or absolute fiction just blinds us to the brilliant literary strategy the author is actually using here. So instead of history or fiction, Dr. Walton introduces this revolutionary lens. We really should be reading Job as a thought experiment. Think of it as a carefully constructed, giant what-if scenario that contains all the features necessary to explore a massively complex philosophical issue. Dr. Walton actually compares this to Jesus' parables. Think about it. When Jesus tells a parable, we don't go demanding archaeological proof that the Good Samaritan existed in exact space and time, right? The philosophical and theological strength comes from the imaginative scenario itself, not from raw historical data. Job functions in a very similar, albeit much grander way.
Now, to make a thought experiment really work, you have to push things to the absolute limit. Consider the extremes the author uses here. First, we have flawless righteousness. If Job were just an okay guy who, sometimes made mistakes, we could easily just blame his suffering on his personal flaws. Second, comprehensive suffering. If he only lost a little bit of his wealth, we'd say, well, everybody has a bad day. But no, the author strips away literally everything. Why? It's a highly deliberate strategy. By creating this surreal, absolute extreme scenario, the author ensures there are absolutely zero easy answers left on the table. You are forced to confront the deep wisdom point head-on. Which leads us to a pretty fascinating realization about the text itself. As Dr. Walton playfully points out, and I absolutely love this quote, there is no stenographer. Just think about it for a second. The massive middle section of this book is just Job and his friends going back and forth, but people don't just sit in the dust and spontaneously speak in highly elevated, perfectly structured ancient poetry. Even the absolute best public speakers today don't talk like that. So treating this as a literal word-for-word historical transcript is, frankly, a little absurd. The author is very clearly using a literary construct to explore these incredibly profound ideas. Which brings us to the giant elephant in the room. If we accept that the speeches are a literary construct, well, what about the very beginning? Did God really make a wager with the devil? This is a provocative, and for a lot of people, a deeply uncomfortable question. Readers for centuries have struggled with this heavenly prologue. The idea that God and Satan are making bets up in heaven, essentially playing games with a human life, has caused a lot of people some intense theological distress. They read it and wonder, wait, is God doing that with my life right now? So here is the crucial takeaway. We need to view that heavenly scene as a literary construct too. It is a what-if opening designed specifically to set up this extreme thought experiment. It is not a theological statement about how God actually operates behind the scenes. The book is definitely not trying to teach us that your personal suffering is the result of some cosmic, divine wager. Once you realize the author is using this heavenly prologue purely as a dramatic setup to get rid of the easy answers, you can finally breathe a huge sigh of relief and just focus on the actual message of the book.
And that brings us to the architectural masterpiece of the text itself. Dr. Walton points out this deliberate sandwiching effect that forms the book's entire rhetorical strategy. On the outside, you have the prose prologue and the prose epilogue. They're the bookends. Inside that, you have the poetic dialogues and the discourses. And sitting right there in the exact middle is a totally unique transition, the hymn to wisdom. Every single piece of this is absolutely essential. If you pull out any one of these layers, the entire coherent message just collapses.
Now, notice how the tension builds inside that sandwich. There's a massive shift between the first half and the second half of the poetry. First, we have the dialogues. This is Job and his friends in alternating back-and-forth arguments. They're desperately trying to figure out why Job is suffering using conventional wisdom, and they literally just run out of steam. The speeches get shorter and shorter until they just stop. They're totally exhausted. Contrast that with the discourses in the second half. These are independent, long, completely uninterrupted speeches from Job, from Elihu, and finally from Yahweh. The dynamic completely shifts from this tired, circular debate to powerful, definitive declarations. But how do we actually get from that exhausting dialogue to those powerful discourses? It happens right here, at the exact center of our sandwich, the pivotal hymn to wisdom in chapter 28. In casual readings, people often think this is just Job continuing to speak, but Dr. Walton argues that here, the narrator actually steps back in. The narrator interrupts the supposedly wisest men in the world who have just argued themselves into a total corner. It's almost as if the narrator looks at them and says, "Seriously? Is that all you've got? You completely missed it." This chapter resets the entire focus. It shifts the conversation away from our human ideas of strict justice and points us toward true wisdom.
Which brings us right to the core of authorial intent, beautifully summarized right here. The truth of the book is in its wisdom teaching, not its historicity. This is the paradigm shift we talked about at the very beginning. If we spend all our time demanding to know exactly what year Job lived, or who the stenographer was, or trying to calculate the exact mechanics of a divine wager, we are entirely missing the authoritative message God is communicating through this human author. The truth isn't found in treating it like a history textbook. The truth is found in the profound wisdom it offers us.
So I really want to leave you with this final provocative thought. How does viewing your own life through the lens of wisdom, rather than divine wagers, change your perspective on suffering? When you go through incredibly hard times, are you looking for a transactional reason, wondering if God is just playing games with you? Or are you seeking the profound, resilient wisdom that the book of Job is actually trying to teach? By embracing this incredible text as a thought experiment designed to stretch our understanding, we don't lose its truth, we actually unlock it. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep wrestling with these big ideas, and I'll see you next time.